We are authorized to be here.
I need a judicial warrant signed by a judge. That is the law.
We're federal agents. We don't answer to you.
You do here.
My teachers
This is a
have
school.
protections. My
My
students have
family,
rights.
you
You're
will
making
not
a very
pass
big
this
mistake.
door
Then it's
and
my
press-
debate.
Three masked agents moved through the hallway of Lincoln High School in Minneapolis at 2:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in October. They had not signed in at the front office. They had not coordinated with administration. They had walked straight through the building as though the rules did not apply to them because, in their experience, they usually did not. The letters on their vests read ICE. The hall monitor, a sophomore named Darius, had seen them coming from the stairwell end of the corridor. He had frozen, pointed toward the science wing when the lead agent asked, and immediately known he had made a mistake. By the time he reached the lab door to warn anyone, the agents were already there. What started as a routine enforcement visit would end with three agents filing out of a school building without the person they came for, a 27-minute standoff captured in full-on school security cameras, and a federal lawsuit that would award Maya Federico $13,700,000 while forcing a reckoning with how immigration enforcement operates inside American schools. If you're ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this story. Maya Federico was 33 years old and had been teaching AP Biology at Lincoln High for 5 years. She was Cuban-American, born in Havana, brought to the United States at 4 years old when her family fled under circumstances she had never fully explained to anyone at the school. She had grown up in Miami, attended public schools, earned a biology degree on academic scholarships while working weekends, and chose teaching because she remembered what it felt like to be the student no one expected anything from. Her AP Biology pass rates were the highest in the district. Students requested her sections by name. Her lab curriculum was inventive enough that the department chair position she had applied for twice and been passed over for twice, always, for reasons that felt deliberately vague, borrowed her lesson frameworks and presented them in staff meetings without attribution. Her equipment requests were routinely denied. Her ideas surfaced in conversations credited to other people. She had become a U.S. citizen through naturalization at 19. Her certificate was framed at home. She had a passport. She voted. She had served on the school safety committee, a role that required a background clearance she passed without complication. By every legal and professional measure, she was exactly who she said she was. And she carried a secret she had told no one at Lincoln High. She had carried it for nearly 30 years. That Tuesday afternoon, Maya was in the middle of a microscopy exercise with her third period class. 23 juniors were identifying cell structures in prepared slides, lab sheets, half-filled, pencils moving. Maya was at a student's bench near the back of the room, adjusting the focus dial on a microscope that kept slipping, speaking quietly to a girl who had been struggling with the distinction between the cell wall and the cell membrane. The room smelled of reagent and dry erase markers. She looked up when she saw Darius at the door. His expression stopped her mid-sentence. The three agents reached the doorway before she could move. The lead agent stated not asked that they were there for Maya Federico. His voice was flat, practiced, and designed to not invite a response. Students at the nearest benches looked up from their slides. One of them put down her pencil. The room held its breath. Principal David Howard heard the radio crackle from his office at the far end of the corridor. He was 54 years old, 2 years from retirement, the kind of administrator who had spent decades learning when to speak slowly and when to move fast. He moved fast. He reached the lab door before the agents could enter. He positioned himself in the frame, arms loose at his sides, and did not move. He asked for a judicial warrant. The lead agent produced an administrative warrant, a document issued by the agency itself, not signed by any judge. Howard informed him, without raising his voice and without conceding a single word, that an administrative warrant did not grant authority to detain a school employee in Minnesota. That on school property with students present they needed a warrant signed by a judge, that they did not have one, that they were welcome to wait in the main office for the district's legal team. The agents threatened obstruction charges. Howard did not move. He called district legal from his cell phone, still standing in the doorway. He called school security. His weight was even. His expression was unreadable. The school security cameras, mounted at both ends of the hallway, captured every second in high definition. Then the hallway began to fill. A history teacher named Renata Voss stepped out of her classroom and positioned herself beside Howard. She said nothing. She simply stood. The school librarian came next, then 2 math instructors, then the vice principal. Within 4 minutes, 11 educators were standing in a loose semicircle outside the biology lab, not aggressive, not loud, not coordinated by any plan or signal. They had heard something wrong in the hallway and moved toward it. Their bodies formed a wall the agents could not cross without committing assault against teachers on school property. Inside the lab, Maya stood behind the semicircle of her colleagues. She gripped the edge of a lab bench. She did not speak. She did not engage with the agents. She thought of her naturalization ceremony at 19, the weight of the moment, the oath, the word citizen, and what it had cost her family to get her to that room. She thought of the microscope slides still on the benches behind her. She thought of her students, still in their seats, watching. The agents radioed for backup. Backup was delayed. They issued warnings. They shifted their weight. They could not advance. They could not legally detain Maya without the warrant they did not have, and they could not physically move 11 educators without triggering consequences that no amount of agency authority could walk back. The district's legal team arrived at 3:14. 2 attorneys reviewed the administrative warrant in 90 seconds and rendered their assessment. Insufficient authority, no judicial signature, active disruption of an operating school. The agents were asked to leave the premises or face a formal trespassing filing. They left at 3:19. The hallway exhaled. Teachers reached for each other. Howard guided Maya into his office and closed the door. He told her the district would provide full legal support. Human Resources would document everything that afternoon. She would not face whatever came next alone. Howard did not go back inside his office for several minutes. He stood in the doorway of the lab, arms at his sides, and watched the empty stairwell where the agents had disappeared. He did not move until he was certain they were gone. Maya was at her kitchen table before 5 in the morning the next day, her laptop open in the dark. Renata Voss had posted the footage at 11:15 the previous night. The caption read, "My colleagues formed a wall so our teacher could keep teaching. This is what standing up looks like." By the time Maya found the post, it had been shared 47,000 times. She watched the clip, 34 seconds of hallway security footage, grainy in the way of institutional cameras, but clear enough. Howard in the doorway, unmoving. The semicircle of teachers. The agents, whose body language had shifted from authority to frustration, somewhere around the 12-minute mark of the actual standoff. Students visible through the lab window glass, small and still, watching from their benches. The ice letters on the vests were readable. There was no ambiguity in the footage about what had happened or who had done what. By 6 in the morning, 3 national news outlets had picked it up. By noon, it was the top trending story in Minnesota. By evening, educators across the country were reposting it. Teachers, union organizers, school administrators, and the comments were filling with people who said they had not known this was happening in schools, and people who said they had always known and were relieved someone had finally filmed it. Maya closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of her kitchen. She was not sure yet what she felt. She was sure it was not over. The district connected her that same day with an immigration attorney named Elena Ostroff, a specialist in wrongful detention and federal overreach with 15 years of case history in exactly this territory. They met that evening in a borrowed conference room at Lincoln High. Maya was still wearing her lanyard. Ostroff did not waste time on reassurance. She explained the legal framework in plain terms. The Fourth Amendment violation was clear, the lack of a judicial warrant was documented, and the school's security footage made the agent's conduct impossible to dispute. She would file the federal lawsuit within the week. Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment. ICE and the Department of Homeland Security named as defendants. But first, she needed to understand exactly why Maya had been targeted, because the answer to that question would determine the shape of the entire case. She requested federal disclosure on the tip that had triggered the visit and began pulling enforcement database records. The results came back in less than 48 hours. An anonymous caller had reported Maya Federico as undocumented. ICE had run the name through their enforcement database and found a match to a deportation order issued in 2014 for a woman named Maya Federico, deported to Cuba after being picked up during a compliance sweep in Florida. The agents had flagged the match, prepared the administrative warrant, and driven to Lincoln High. They had not checked the Social Security numbers. The numbers were different. They had not compared the dates of birth, also different. They had not pulled Maya's employment records, which would have confirmed her citizenship status with a single phone call to the district's HR department. They had not reviewed her naturalization records, which were on file in the same federal database system they were using. They had done none of it. Internal emails obtained in the early stages of discovery confirmed what agent depositions would later admit under oath. Field verification tools existed. Agents were aware of them. They chose not to use them. The reason given in the emails was time constraints. One phone call. That was the distance between what happened to Maya Federico and what should have happened. A single call to the district's HR department. A 30-second check against a social security number. The difference between an armed visit to an active classroom and a file quietly closed on a desk. Before we get to what Ostroff found next, the detail that would stop a federal courtroom cold if you have gotten this far in the story, share it with someone who needs to see it. And drop a comment below. If one phone call was all it took to confirm Maya was a citizen, why wasn't it made? Because what Ostroff found next was not a bureaucratic error. It was a ghost. Ostroff called Maya on the third day of discovery and told her she needed to ask a question and that she needed Maya to answer it honestly, because the answer would change the case in ways neither of them could fully anticipate. Maya answered honestly. The deportation order in the ICE database, the record bearing her name, issued in 2014, the document that had sent 3 agents to her classroom belonged to her twin sister, her identical twin. When Maya's family fled Cuba, they were separated in the crossing. She was 4 years old. The night was dark, the water unpredictable, the decisions made in seconds, with consequences that could not be undone. Her twin ended up in the United States foster system, under a different surname. Maya's family searched. They searched for years, through channels and agencies and dead ends, until the searching became more painful than the not knowing. Maya had grown up with the shape of a person who should have been there at every school desk, every scholarship application, every first day at Lincoln High, and was not. Her twin had eventually been picked up during a Florida compliance sweep in 2014. Identified through fragmented, partially matching records, deported to Cuba under a mistaken identity. The deportation order was filed under the name Maya Federico because that was the name in the incomplete file that came closest to the records available. Her twin had never been formally documented under her real name in any U.S. system. ICE had sent 3 armed agents to a biology classroom because of a database record created by the deportation of a woman Maya had spent 30 years mourning. The same system that separated her family and the water between Cuba and Florida had, without warning and without any verification, followed her across 3 decades and arrived at her door in a school where she had built everything she had left to build. Ostroff told her the twin revelation transformed the case. A constitutional violation was already serious. What they now had was a constitutional violation with a human history behind it that no jury would be able to set aside. Maya sat with the phone in her hand after the call ended. The microscope slides were still on her desk from the day before. The lab was quiet. The secret she had carried for 30 years had a shape, now a legal shape, a documented shape, a shape that could be placed in front of a jury and named. She set the phone down and did not move for a long time. The federal trial opened on a cold morning in late April. The courtroom was full before the session began. Journalists in the gallery, educators who had driven from districts across the state, immigration rights advocates who had been following the case since the footage went viral, and several former students of Maya's who had taken the day off work to be present. The case had become something larger than a lawsuit. The room knew it. The security footage from Lincoln High played on the court monitor in full, not trimmed to 34 seconds, but complete all 27 minutes of the standoff. From the moment the agents reached the lab door to the moment they disappeared down the stairwell. Every agent deposition was entered into the record. The admissions were unambiguous. Agents had proceeded on a name match alone. Field verification tools had existed. They had not been used. The reason documented in internal communications was time constraints. Teacher testimonies followed over the next several days. Renata Voss described stepping into the hallway as a decision made without deliberation. She heard something wrong and moved toward it. Other staff members described Howard in the doorway with a consistency that left no room for interpretation. Still, certain, immovable. Several teachers testified about Maya's teaching specifically. Her biology pass rates, her lab design, the department chair applications that had been set aside twice in favor of candidates with weaker records and less experience. The portrait built over 5 days of testimony was of a woman who had been excellent for years in a building that had never fully acknowledged it until a crisis made ignoring her impossible. On the 8th day, Maya Federico took the stand. She described the standoff in precise sequence. The time, the vests, Darius at the door, the sound of Howard's voice in the hallway, controlled and flat and final. She described standing behind her colleagues, gripping the edge of a bench, watching through the lab window as her students sat frozen at their microscopes. She described her naturalization ceremony at 19 Point the room, the oath, the word citizen landing in her chest as something earned and permanent. She was composed throughout. She did not perform anything. She reported what had happened and what it had cost her, in the same tone she used to describe a lab procedure to a struggling student. Then she paused. She told the court that the deportation order ICE had matched to her name was not a bureaucratic error in any ordinary sense of the phrase. It was her sister. Her identical twin, separated from the family during the crossing from Cuba when they were 4 years old, lost in a foster system under a different surname, deported 30 years later under a mistaken identity because a fragmented record loosely matched and no agent had looked closely enough to check. She told the court she had built her entire adult life, the scholarships, the teaching, the students who needed someone to believe in them, carrying the absence of a person who should have been beside her. She told them that the same system responsible for that crossing, for that separation, for that deportation, had arrived at her classroom door 3 decades later, wearing tactical vests and carrying a piece of paper that did not authorize them to do what they intended to do because her sister's ghost was still in their database. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors had stopped taking notes. The lead defense attorney did not immediately rise. The defense case lasted 4 days and accomplished very little. The closing argument, good faith reliance on available information, credible anonymous tip, limited field resources, collapsed under the weight of what discovery had produced. School employment records confirming Maya's citizenship had been accessible with a single phone call. Her social security number, different from the one attached to the deportation order, would have flagged the mismatch before any warrant was printed. Her naturalization status was on file in the same federal system the agents had used to pull the name match. The anonymous tip had not been verified at any stage before the warrant was prepared. At no point in the process had any agent asked the question the case ultimately turned on: is this actually the same person? A former ICE field supervisor, now working as a compliance consultant, testified for the plaintiff. He described a systemic culture that had consistently prioritized enforcement speed over verification accuracy, treating name matches as conclusions rather than starting points, and that had produced misidentification cases. Across dozens of jurisdictions over several years, Maya's case was not exceptional in its mechanics. It was exceptional in its visibility. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The verdict was unanimous. Liability on all constitutional counts. Compensatory damages of $4,200,000 for emotional distress, career impact, and documented trauma. Punitive damages of $9,500,000, set at a level the agency could not absorb as a routine budget line. Total, $13,700,000. 3 agents were terminated. 2 supervisors were formally demoted. ICE issued revised field protocols. Mandatory multi-point identity verification before any enforcement action targeting school staff. Mandatory coordination with school administration. Mandatory judicial warrant. The reforms were not complete. They were, for the first time, binding. Maya used a portion of the award to establish a legal defense fund for educators and school staff facing similar enforcement actions. She partnered with immigration rights organizations to run training sessions in school districts across the country, what employee protections look like under federal law, how schools are and are not required to cooperate with enforcement visits, what a judicial warrant is, and why an administrative warrant is not the same thing. She returned to Lincoln High in September. Her lab was full. Her students were waiting. Principal David Howard announced his retirement the following March. At his farewell in the school gymnasium, several people spoke. Maya spoke last. She did not recount the standoff. She did not name the lawsuit or the verdict or the figure the jury had returned. She said only that Howard had stood in the door, and that standing in the door was all any of them could ever do, and that it turned out to be enough. There is a plaque in the science wing now, brass letters on dark polished wood, mounted on the wall beside the biology lab, the same lab where 23 juniors once sat, frozen over their microscope slides while 11 people stood in the hallway outside and did not move. The plaque reads, "Here we stood, for each other."
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.